Hi, peace lovers. It's December, and I'm still practicing my Kitty Compost voice. For these last couple of weeks of the year, I've gathered 17 holiday inspired public domain readings from writers like L. Frank Baum, Henry David Thoreau, and Charles Dickens. It's a bit quirky, I know, but so is Kitty, and so is the new Peace podcast series arriving right here on New Year's Day, the Peace Experiments, Experiment Zero. A humming government facility, a skeptical fact-checking goat, and a classroom full of teens collide when reporter Kitty Ocampos begins investigating the myths that keep peace just out of reach. The peace experiments explore what happens when young people finally ask the questions adults avoid. And perhaps you've been hearing the Next Peacelands here on the podcast. We'll be returning soon to the practice of holding peaceful intention for the specific war zones and the countries that supply weapons to them. But during this stretch of Kitty Reed's Holiday Lit for Peace, the Next Peacelands will simply offer the names of some of the spiritual organizations working quietly and steadily for peace. You can add your own peace intentions to their hopeful rivers of peace if you choose to stay through the end of this episode. As always, the creative books and projects I make for peace can be found at aviskalfsbeek.com, and the music for the Next Peacelands comes from the talented Javier Peque Rodriguez. Joy and peace to you and yours, and to the world. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from Charles Dickens, long before he wrote A Christmas Carol, back when he was still experimenting with how to mix humor, morality, and the cold bite of an English writer. He published the story of the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton in 1836 as part of the Pickwick Papers. As you can feel Dickens trying out the very tools he'd later use to reshape how the world thought about Christmas itself. Dickens grew up under real hardship. His father sent to debtor's prison, his own childhood cut short by factory work, and he never forgot how poverty exposes both the cruelty and the kindness inside a society. By the time he wrote this story, he had learned to wrap serious questions in lively scenes, using the supernatural not for cheap scares, but to shine a clear light on human behavior. This tale follows a bitter sexton, a.k.a. gravedigger, named Gabriel Grubb, a fellow who seems determined to greet Christmas Eve with a scowl. Dickens sends him underground literally to face a troop of goblins who show him visions of sorrow, patience, and quiet goodness. You can see the early skeleton of Scrooge here, a hard man softened by being made to witness the simple truth of other people's lives. We'll read just a short piece today, enough to notice Dickens' mix of mischief and moral weight, and to see how even in his early work he was asking how a person might wake up to the responsibilities of being human. And well, honey, I could read the engraving off a frostbitten church bell if it helped us ring the truth a little clearer. Sometimes the words remind us that transformation isn't magic, that's tail scratching. It's honesty, humility, and choosing a better road. And nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from the story of the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton by Charles Dickens. Chapter 29. In an old abbey town down in this part of the country, a long, long while ago, so long ago that the story must be a true one because our great-grandfathers implicitly believed it, there officiated as sexton and gravedigger in the churchyard one Gabriel Grubb. It by no means follows that because a man is a sexton and constantly surrounded by the emblems of mortality, therefore he should be a morose and melancholy man. Your undertakers are the merriest fellows in the world, and I once had the honor of being on intimate terms with a mute who in private life and off duty was as comical and jocose a little fella as ever chirped out a devil-may-care song without a hitch in his memory or drained off a good stiff glass without stopping for breath. But notwithstanding these precedents to the contrary, Gabriel Grubb was an ill-conditioned, cross-grained, surly fellow, a morose and lonely man who consorted with nobody but himself and an old wicker bottle which fitted into his large, deep waistcoat pocket, and who eyed each merry face as it passed him by with such a deep scowl of malice and ill humour it was difficult to meet without feeling something the worse for. A little before twilight one Christmas Eve, Gabriel shouldered his spade, lighted his lantern, and betook himself towards the old churchyard, for he had got a grave to finish by next morning, and feeling very low, he thought it might raise his spirits, perhaps, if he went on with his work at once. As he went his way up the ancient street, he saw the cheerful light of the blazing fires gleam through the old casements, and heard the loud laugh and the cheerful shouts of those who were assembled around them. He marked the bustling preparations for next day's cheer, and smelled the numerous savory odors consequent thereupon, as they steamed up from the kitchen windows in clouds. All this was gall and wormwood to the heart of Gabriel Grubb, and when groups of children bounded out of the houses, tripped across the road, and were met before they could knock at the opposite door by half a dozen curly-headed little rascals who crowded round them as they flocked upstairs to spend the evening in their Christmas games, Gabriel smiled grimly and clutched the handle of his spade with a firmer grasp as he thought of measles, scarlet fever, thrush, whooping cough, and a good many other sources of consolation besides. In this happy frame of mind, Gabriel strode along, returning a short, sullen growl to the good-humored greetings of such of his neighbors as now and then passed him, until he turned into the dark lane which led to the churchyard. Now, Gabriel had been looking forward to reaching the dark lane, because it was, generally speaking, a nice, gloomy, mournful place into which the townspeople did not much care to go, except in broad daylight and when the sun was shining. Consequently, he was not a little indignant to hear a young urchin roaring out some jolly song about Merry Christmas in this very sanctuary which had been called Coffin Lane ever since the days of the old abbey and the time of the shaven-headed monks. As Gabriel walked on and the voice grew nearer, he found it proceeded from a small boy who was hurrying along to join one of the little parties in the old street, and who, partly to keep himself company and partly to prepare himself for the occasion, was shouting out the song at the highest pitch of his lungs. So Gabriel waited until the boy came up, and then dodged him into a corner and rapped him over the head with his lantern 5 or 6 times, just to teach him to modulate his voice. And as the boy hurried away with his hand to his head, singing quite a different sort of tune, Gabriel Grubb chucked very heartily to himself and entered the churchyard, locking the gate behind him. He took off his coat, set down his lantern, and getting into the unfinished grave, worked at it for an hour or so with right good will. But the earth was hardened with the frost, and it was no very easy matter to break it up and shovel it out, and although there was a moon, it was a very young one, and shed little light upon the grave, which was in the shadow of the church. At any other time these obstacles would have made Gabriel Grubb very moody and miserable, but he was so well pleased with having stopped the small boy's singing that he took little heed of the scanty progress he had made, and looked down into the grave when he had finished work for the night with grim satisfaction, murmuring as he gathered up his things, "Brave lodging for one, brave lodgings for one, a few feet of cold earth when life is done, a stone at the head, a stone at the feet, a rich juicy meal for the worms to eat, rank grass overhead and damp clay around, brave lodgings for one, these in holy ground." "Ho, ho!" laughed Gabriel Grubb as he sat himself down on a flat tombstone which was a favourite resting place of his, and drew forth his wicker bottle. "A coffin at Christmas, a Christmas box, ho, ho, ho!" "Ho, ho, ho!" repeated a voice which sounded close behind him. Gabriel paused in some alarm in the act of raising the wicker bottle to his lips, and looked around. The bottom of the oldest grave about him was not more still and quiet than the churchyard in the pale moonlight. The cold hoarfrost glistened on the tombstone and sparkled like rows of gems among the stone carvings of the old church. The snow lay hard and crisp upon the ground and spread over the thickly strewn mounds of earth, so white and smooth a cover that it seemed as if corpses lay there, hidden only by their winding sheets. Not the faintest rustle broke the profound tranquillity of the solemn scene. Sound itself appeared to be frozen up. All was so cold and still. "It was the echoes," said Gabriel Grubb, raising the bottle to his lips again. "It was not," said a deep voice. Gabriel started up and stood rooted to the spot with astonishment and terror, for his eyes rested on a form that made his blood run cold. Thank you for listening and allowing me to practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the Next Peacelands. Following is a special holiday edition of the Next Peacelands, where we pause on listing the war zones and weapons suppliers. Instead, we rest our intention of peace on a few of the spiritual organizations working tirelessly toward peace. While this list is far from comprehensive, the total number of organizations, large and small, would number in the thousands if we included all who work daily for peace. I ask that you consider taking this time to add your own intention of peace to those working daily toward that goal. Mennonite Central Committee. Peace is here. Community of Santa Hidio. Peace is here. The Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. Peace is here. Religions for Peace. Peace is here. Pax Christi International. Peace is here. American Friends Service Committee. Peace is here. Lutheran Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Peace is here. Baptist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Community Peacemaker Teams. Peace is here. Episcopal Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Friends Peace Teams. Peace is here. Muslim Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Buddhist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Quaker Peace and Social Witness. Peace is here. Network of Christian Peace Organizations. Peace is here. Network of Spiritual Progressives. Peace is here. United Religions Initiative. Peace is here. The Christian Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Peace is here. Agape International Spiritual Center. Peace is here.